Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to stop by here on this very important day before I head out. I do want to stop by here um, and say hello to everybody. This is a very important day. Today, as we gather as a nation to reflect on some of the most defining moments in the struggle for civil rights in America. 60 years ago today, on March 7th, 1965, a group of brave men and women set out on foot from Brown Chapel in Selma, Alabama, marching toward the state capital of Montgomery. They marched not in anger, not in violence, but in hope. Hope that America could live up to its highest ideals. Hope that the promise of democracy could finally be extended to all its citizens, regardless of race. Hope that their children and grandchildren would not have to fight the same battles they have been forced to fight. But as they stepped onto the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they were met with the full force of injustice. State troopers armed with clubs and tear gas unleashed terror upon these peaceful demonstrators as they were beaten, trampled, gassed, left bloodied, and broken on the pavement. And yet, despite the violence, the the and despite the pain, they did not turn back. They stood, they knelt, they crawled if they had to, but they did not give up. That day, Bloody Sunday, was not just a moment of brutality, it was a moment of reckoning. It forced the nation to see what many had tried to ignore for too long. The images of John Lewis being beaten to the ground, of Elma Boynton laying unconscious, of hundreds of marchers fleeing in terror. Those images shook the conscience of America. They galvanized a moment. They moved President Lyndon B. Johnson to stand before Congress just days later and declare, "We shall overcome." And they led just 5 months later to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, one of the most significant pieces of legislation in history. Think about that. That single Voting Rights Act is groundbreaking. It's groundbreaking, and it's what and what's sad. It's we're fighting for that same right here. Um, you know, 60 plus years later. That act opened doors that had been closed for generations. It struck down barriers designed to keep Black Americans from the ballot box. It empowered millions to finally claim their rightful place in our democracy. And it reaffirmed a fundamental truth that the right to vote is not just a privilege, it's a sacred duty, the cornerstone of our democracy. Long ago in DeSoto, Texas, I learned that in high school. I learned that. And that's what led me to where I am here today. But, like I just said, 60 years later, we must ask ourselves, have we fully honored the legacy of those who marched? Have we really done that? Have we done everything in our power to protect the right they bled for? Because make no mistake, the right to vote is once again under attack. We've seen states pass laws that make it harder for people to vote. We have seen polling places shut down in Black and brown communities. We've seen efforts to make it more difficult to register, to limit early voting, to undermine the integrity of our elections with baseless claims and partisan games. And let us be clear. Voter suppression is not a relic of the past. It's happening right now. In 2025, in states across this country, it's happening. Not with billy clubs and tear gas, but with restrictive laws and gerrymandering districts. It's happening through intimidation, misinformation, and deliberate attempts to silence voices that some would rather not hear from. That is why today, as we honor these who marched on that bridge, we must recommit ourselves to fight. They started to fight the fight they started. The right to vote is not something we can take for granted. It's something we must defend every day, in every election, in every community across this country. That's why my administration is working to restore and strengthen the Voting Rights Act. It is why we are pushing for laws that make it easier, not harder, for every American to cast their ballot. It is why we are fighting to expand early voting to ensure automatic voter registration, to protect against voter intimidation and discrimination. Because we know that when more people vote, democracy is stronger. When every voice is heard, our nation is better. And let me say this to every young person listening here this afternoon. The march from Selma, it's not over. It is not over. It did not end when the marchers reached Montgomery. It did not end when the Voting Rights Act was signed into law. And it did not end when John Lewis crossed that bridge one last time before he left this world. That march continues today in every polling place, in every city, in small town, in every place where people still struggle to make their voices heard. So I ask you, will you march? Will you stand up for democracy? Will you make sure that the sacrifices of those who came before us were not in vain? I believe in America's ability to meet this moment. I believe that just as we did in 1965, we can rise to the challenge before us. But it will take all of us, all of us. It will take citizens demanding their rights. It will take leaders of courage and conscience. It will take each and every one of us walking in the footsteps of those who marched before to ensure that the promise of democracy is kept, not just for some, but for all. 60 years ago, they faced violence, but they did not turn back. They faced hatred, but they did not lose hope. They faced injustice, but they did not give up. Neither can we. May we honor their memory with action. May we carry forward their struggle with determination. And may we never forget the fight for justice, for democracy, and for the very soul of this nation. I think we heard that before one time. It's a fight we're waging and a fight that we must win. May God bless you. May God bless those who marched. And may God bless Selma. And God bless the United States and America. And may He protect our troops. Thank you all very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.